Dasha Buyanova, go ahead. Thank you, Sasha. Good morning, colleagues, dear participants. We start the last day of our conference. It's Friday morning, and we'll start with a quest session. Our title today is How to Waste Your Money on the Local Community. And we plan to have some fun. And let me first introduce all of our panelists, who they are in the real world, and then I will assign roles to everybody. Okay, so this is Partnership Day, and we have all sorts of panelists today. They represent various areas, and that's nice. So we have Ludmila Danilova, Executive Director of the Kupol Foundation. Hello from Chukotka. Yes, I forgot to mention that we have a unique geographic situation. We have people from all over the place, from all over the country. So you mentioned we started with the Chukotka. Now we also have Margarita Tsoy, Vice President of Exxon Oil and Gas Limited, speaking from Sakhalin. Hello, nice to be with you. So we have two people from Sakhalin. We have Margarita, and we also have Yelena Alohina joining us later. She also works for Exxon Oil and Gas Limited. It's good evening. Yeah, and good morning to you in Moscow. Right. Let's move a little bit closer to Europe. We have Natalia Levitskaya, President of the Sinara Foundation. Yes, it's day here, so good day to you. Okay, moving on to the central part of Russia, Lena Malitskaya, head of the Siberian Center for Public Initiatives. Hello, Elena. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We're in Siberia. We're actually a little bit further to the east, and it's afternoon here. Oh, okay, yeah, we have so many time zones in Russia. Okay, we have two people from Penza, my colleagues, local community foundations. We have Oleg Sharipkov, Civil Union Foundation. Hi. And we also have Snezhana Frantsuzova. Snezhana is a community manager at mail.ru group, and she's also member of the Civil Union board. Hi, Snezhana. Okay, did I introduce everybody? And we have one more special guest. He was not part of the initial panel, but that's a bonus. That's an addition to our panel. I would like to introduce, this is our colleague, because this is going to be an international session. So we have one more person. This is Dr. James McGowan. He's head of the European Community Foundation Initiative. Hello, James.
Hello. Hello from Ireland. Good to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So Ireland, it's even earlier. It must be even earlier in Ireland. Excellent. Good. Okay, let's get started. So let me explain to you what this session is going to be all about. Some of our panelists today will play different roles, not as I introduced them initially. We thought it would be fun to imagine what the process looks like when a company or someone wants to donate some money to local community. Local communities is a complex subject. Working with a local community involves many different aspects because there are a lot of different factors at play. There are different parties involved. You may have community foundations. You may have companies helping the cities where they operate. You may have special corporate foundations set up for this particular purpose. So you may have different stakeholders. So we decided we'll do this session this way. We'll have two main heroes who will have to go through a quest. And two of my colleagues agreed to be these heroes, these characters, Oleg Sharkov and Snezhana Frantsuzova. So these two will play the role of improvised investors, people who decided they want to develop a local community all of a sudden. So they will introduce themselves in a couple of minutes and explain which roles they're going to be playing. And we panelists, and those watching this session online, you can write and send in your questions to the chat box. So we must help these investors to pass this quest, show them what mistakes they can make, what traps they should avoid, what does it mean to work with the local community. So these are all the questions and problems we'll be looking at. And then at the end of our session, we'll ask James to give us a fuller picture. He will share how they work with local communities in different countries. So that's our plan for this morning. All our speakers will play their own roles, play themselves, except for Yelena Alokhina. She will play a role of an NGO operating in the same locality. So that's a kind of an experiment. So without further ado, let's start playing our roles. Let's follow the script. Let's get started. Oleg, Snezhana, to you. Thank you, Dasha. Okay. We have a large, successful regional company, and we certainly need a very good corporate social program, right? Right, Oleg. On the one hand, I understand you have to follow the general trend, and I agree that we should present ourselves in a bigger way because we are a major company. Yet there are some others who are still ahead of us. So should we do something about the local community? Because I heard there are some guys who do something like that. Maybe we should consider doing something similar. What are you even talking about? What is this term, local community? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Helping children or what? Yes, maybe helping children, but there are these things called NGOs. I don't know what they do. Maybe they just pocket money, kind of like what we do. So there are a couple of organizations like that here. Maybe we could try them out. Well, let's just pick 2 or 3 and give them some money. Okay. Let me interrupt here. How about we stop for a second and let's consider what is happening here. We've got some people who have been experimenting with this. So, Natalia, let me ask you. Should people be looking for 2 or 3 pretty obvious NGOs already operating in this locality? Or maybe you should take a different approach when starting your work with the local community? Good morning again. That's an interesting question. Okay, here is what I would like to say. At the initial stage, maybe it can work out like that. Yet, if you have a major successful regional company and you plan to work in this territory for a pretty long time and you're looking for a long-term effect, maybe you should take a different approach when starting this work. We have a lot of tools available to us. Let me mention a few. Maybe you will like them and you decide to use them. Number 1, there is this effective tool when working with the local communities, and this is a grant contest for NGOs. When you start working in a new territory, you may be sometimes you're not familiar with all the NGOs. Actually, usually the number of NGOs is much larger than the ones you know, but for some reason, some of them remain invisible to you. So when you have a grant contest for NGOs, this is an opportunity. This is a mechanism which enables you to get a better picture. Open this up for all the interested parties, include everyone. So all NGOs get a chance to do something for the territory. So when you said we don't need to think, let me tell you, this is not going to be easy, yet on the other hand, it's not rocket science. All you need to do is you need to figure out what would your company like to do? What is your mission? What is your purpose? What does it have in common with this particular territory's interests? See where they overlap. So this will help you identify the areas where you're going to be rendering support. So identify these few areas where you will focus. Next, consider inviting external experts to evaluate projects that will be submitted for the grant contest. Think about it. Do you have experts like that in your territory? This will make it easier for you to make a decision. Because if you're familiar with 2 or 3 NGOs, it is very likely that you will focus all your attention on the people you know. And one more important point. Even at this initial stage, remember about digital technology. For example, we have the presidential grant fund, and they have a digital platform. And I think people who do something similar, they use this as a role model. They set up similar platforms. For example, our foundation, we have a very similar platform to the one used by the Presidential Grant Foundation. And then this really helped us improve the quality of bids submitted for the contest. Once you have the framework, once you have this platform in place, it is much easier for NGOs to present their projects in a proper way. Of course, this will require some efforts on your part when organizing this contest. Yet, it will render a very good effect and will make your work much easier going forward. And one more point about the grant contest. It has to be transparent. When you review all the bids, it has to be transparent so that all the NGOs working with you get positive impressions. They should view you as an ally. They should realize you're on their side, you're helping them, you're ready to work together with them. This is also very important. In our discussions, we often mention the word collaboration. And Natalia, we'll talk about collaboration a little later. So let's not go there right now. I have a question for you. You mentioned grant contests. You said this was a good mechanism. And you said that quite often we have a situation where you think there are only 2 or 3 NGOs in your territory, and actually you have many more of those. And I know that your foundation works in smaller territories. So could you please share your experience? Let's say you go to a new territory, which is relatively small. How do you look for NGOs you can work with? Because even with a grant contest, they will not learn about it straight away. How do you reach out to them? How do you look for those unusual suspects? Actually, there are a lot of, you can have open workshops, or you can talk to the local authorities, local education board. Maybe they could help you. Maybe they can identify some NGOs to you. And actually, every time we go to a new territory, we work quite well with the local authorities. And usually it's no problem, no big deal to find all the NGOs who would be interested in joining us in our work. I remember over 10 years ago, we did a grant contest in Yekaterinburg, and it was very easy for us because this was a long-term project and we were a high-profile name, so it was no big deal. But then a couple of years ago, we went to a new territory. We had to start from scratch there. This was in Orenburg, and we really had to think hard how to reach out to all the NGOs that are available there. So in addition to all the normal things, things that we usually do, we prepared an online workshop and we promoted it for all the potential participants to establish contact with them. This kind of direct interaction through workshops, conferences, usually works quite well. But because of the pandemic, of course, you have to rely more on online events. So it's really great that we had extensive experience with digital tools. This really helped us when the pandemic broke out. And I mentioned this platform that we created, similar to what the Presidential Grant Foundation has. It proved really helpful as well. But let me mention one more mechanism that we found very useful, something that we lack. When developing the NGO sector, there is something we can do here. Last year, we launched a new project, and our goal is very simple: to find activists who would be willing to work together with us on various projects. So people who care, and we wanted to see if we can make it more systemic. So we identified these activist people and we trained them, gave them some skills, educated them how to organize some activities intended to improve the quality of life in their territories. So last year, we launched this project in one particular city, and it worked quite well. So this year, we decided to use the same approach in several other cities and towns, Yekaterinburg, Rostov, etc. And this brings in a lot of new people who can be our allies and work with us on our projects. So one of the things we plan to do in the near future is we'll use these people, working with them on, we will provide them with funds to implement their projects. They will have to present their project for our contest. We will review them, and then we will allocate funds for the winners in this contest. That's another approach you can take. This will help you with systemic, qualitative change in the territory. Local communities are special. They're all in the same territory. It's not their profession that they have in common. It's not their ethnicity or anything else. It's their territory that they have in common. So you have to find something, some common interest. And that's the key to a successful work with the local community. This is key. If I may, I would like to add couple more words. It's really important to monitor the effect of the efficiency, the effectiveness of your project. We'll talk about this later on. Okay, I stop here. So let's take it step by step. Don't cover everything straight away, right? We have this company, and we have this business that wants to start their work with the local community. Okay, let's go back. Natalia, with decades of experience, says that if you only know about 2 or 3 NGOs, probably there are more of those, and you need a grant contest or anything else or something else to find more NGOs. For example, you may identify some activists, local activists, and talk to them, find something that all active people may have in common in this territory. And this may take several years. You can't develop a local community overnight. You need to go through certain stages. Okay, so start writing things down if you don't want to waste your money. Well, when you listen to smart people, the picture becomes clear, right, Snezhana? What do you mean? Well, we are a big company, and they are talking about waiting for several years. We can't wait. We need to do something quickly. Right, I agree. It's taking too long. We don't have the time. We can't afford that. Okay, let's take 10% of our revenue, maybe 100 million rubles, and let's put an ad in the newspaper. We're looking for NGOs, and I think we'll get an immediate response. People will start coming in, and by the end of the year, the governor will be issuing local awards, so we need to get one. So we need to do something quickly now. Good idea, I agree. Okay, let's check with other panelists. Maybe you have some ideas. Margarita, how about you? Your company is also pretty big and pretty successful. You have lots of money. And if we take Sakhalin Island, this is a remote place with a low density population. Will this approach work? I'm very fortunate to be speaking on this subject because people normally think that the biggest problem with social projects, social investment, is the lack of funds. As long as you've got the money, you have no problem. All you have to do is find the money. That's all. So all discussions are about how do you find a sponsor? How do you motivate the sponsor to provide you with funds? How to get the money? But it's like a fairy tale, you know, when they say they got married and they lived happily ever after. No, it doesn't work like that. Once you get the money, your work only gets started. If you got the money, this does not mean your project is successful. This is the beginning of a long, hard work, because money in itself is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, if you don't have the money, that's bad. But if you have lots of money, and if you handle this money irresponsibly, the outcome may be very negative. So, if you give money to some unknown NGO for some obscure project without clear results, and this project didn't work out, this NGO wasn't able to achieve results, so you get a negative effect and you suffer reputational losses. How come? You're a big serious company and you're working with such an irresponsible, unprofessional partner, and you failed with your project. So when you fund projects, you have to be very careful. That's why our company, when we work on our social budget, it's not how much money we want to offer. No, it's not, doesn't work like that. We start from the other end of the other side of the problem. We are looking for good partners, and we're considering if they have good projects ready. If there are no partners like that, if there are no projects, we are not going to allocate any funds. Even though we've got the money, we just know that we may encounter negative consequences if this project fails. And conversely, let's say we plan to give a certain amount of money to philanthropy, and then we find a very good partner with a very good project. We will provide additional funds on top of what we had planned, because we see this as a good opportunity for social investment. This is the cornerstone of our program activity. You need partners. And we've been saying this for years. When we receive bids, we review this NGO, whether they have resources to, whether they have a clear plan, that they have the skills they need for this project. We always look very carefully at all the bids, and we use all these criteria to pick winners in our contest. And still we have situations where an NGO requests support for their project, and then in the end they come, it didn't work out. How about I give this money back to you? And we are always disappointed with situations like that. So it's wrong to think that the biggest problem is the lack of money. No. With social investment, it's very important to have a good partner, a partner with a lot of experience, a partner who knows how this works, who has all the tools, all the technologies for implementing their project. This is the key. It's not just about giving money to the first NGO you find. And even if you have extensive experience, still, you have to verify how did this NGO plan their budget? What about their schedule? How do they allocate their resources? You have to consider all these things. They are all crucial. And I agree with the previous speaker. That's why it's important to have a grant contest. When you have a contest, especially if you invite independent experts, they can evaluate the quality of all the bids, the quality of all the projects, whether they're ready, whether they're qualified to implement this project. The goal is not just to do something. The goal is to achieve results. So if you know what the goal is, you should be working toward this goal. This is the key. Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. So, guys from a successful company X, it looks like having money is not enough. You need to find good partners in your territory. Okay, Oleg, the plot is getting thicker. We have to do something. We need to plan our budget. How about We train them. Exactly. Let's do that. I got a phone call from the World Association of Coaches yesterday. So how about we hire a couple of coaches and they will train those NGOs. If it works well, we can actually hire those coaches for our company to work with our employees. Yeah, but you have to consider if they're the most expensive ones or not. Because if they're not the most expensive ones, those are going to be, yeah, those won't work. We should only invite the top ones, the most expensive ones. Yes, we need to impress everyone. Yes, we have to, best coaches in business suits, you know. Okay, let's see if this will really work. Do you have to invite a world famous coaching organization and spend a lot of money on it? Are there any other approaches that might work? So let's talk to an organization. Whom should we invite to educate us? Some world famous coaches, or are there any options available? Elena? Okay, as far as education is concerned, of course, we always like to learn, and you always want to learn from the best, because if you learn from the best, you expect to achieve the best results, right? But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. We, as an NGO, we learned a lot from various people back in the day. We learned from Russian experts. Back then, we didn't have any international experts available in our territory because our situation was somewhat special. So we relied on Russian experts first, and it wasn't easy from the start. It was quite scary to plan projects, to accept money, because you have to, it's not like you just put the money in your pocket. You're accountable. You have to provide reporting. So it wasn't easy. But once you get through this, through the resistance stage, and you reach the acceptance stage, it turns out it's actually not that scary. It's okay. You can write up a project plan. If there is a very real problem and you know whom you're working for, if you have a clear picture, you can do it. So once we achieved our first results and we saw that it really works, it really helps people living in our territory, we achieved some substantial practical results, other people started asking us to share our experience. So we began to share. First, we shared our experience with some partner organization, and this worked very well. We just shared our experience. But when these people that we shared our experience with, when they applied and when they won their first grants, we saw that we were on the right track. So by now, I can tell you that we do this regularly. We have this kind of workshops on a regular basis. We do this for NGOs, for government-funded organizations, because they're always very much afraid to request money or request grants. They don't want to be accountable. And anyway, we see very good results. The reason our seminars are so successful is because we are local. We live in this territory. We know about all the local issues. We talk to the local people a lot. So it's easier for us to figure out the right approach to dealing with local issues. So that's the approach we take, and it works quite well. All right. So Yelena, from a regional NGO, tells us that you don't need to go too far. So you don't need to look for a guru from a faraway land. You may find someone locally. Natalia, I think you want to add something. Right. Very briefly. Very briefly. Actually, we focus a lot on this matter, and our company has its own university, actually several universities. So we included our corporate university in this program, and we asked them to develop a special educational program for our employees, first and foremost, because our employees are also members of the local community. So we help them develop skills in social projects, creative design, and preparing, planning social projects. By giving them these skills, we strengthen the local community, and we can reach out to the local community through our employees, and this works very well. We don't just develop the volunteer movement among our employees. In addition, we also do that. We use our corporate university to train them in organizing social projects. Okay, this is a good example. So you're not only educating NGOs, you're also educating people. And like I said, Russia is a huge country. If you're a regional company, you need to know that you should not invite educators from abroad or from Moscow. We have regional specialists who really know how to work in a particular territory. Let me go to Lena Malitskaya in Novosibirsk. So whom would you invite? Who are the best experts? Well, I would recommend looking for someone close to you. Of course, as we learned during the pandemic, you can also learn remotely. You can be educated by people very far away if you do it online. But generally speaking, I would recommend talking to local, regional organizations who are more aware of your regional context. You don't have to go to Moscow necessarily. External advisors are not that familiar with your context. So first, see if you can find someone local. They can offer you some training in communications or in something else. You need to learn to manage your project, not just write up a bid for the grant contest. So see which NGOs, for example, were successful in winning grants in your particular region. You can contact them and they may get you in touch with some people who may be able to help you. For example, in our city, my organization is an infrastructure NGO. We work with many different NGOs, and I can tell you that we have about 10 organizations who might offer you a much better training on a local level than anybody you can invite from Moscow. There we have NGOs that specialize in helping people with HIV, with helping orphans, etc., etc. Anyway, just see if you can find a local infrastructure NGO. They will help you. They will explain to you the situation with the local companies, with the local authorities. They will help you get the right, they will explain to you what priorities are for your particular territory. You need to look for somebody big, somebody from the outside. You mentioned the Presidential Grant Foundation. Don't try to copy what they do. You need something simpler, something easier to understand if you operate in a small territory. Yes, there is this format used by the Presidential Foundation in Moscow, but it's hardly applicable in our case. Okay, thank you, Yelena. And we mentioned at the beginning, it will take some time to get started. You can't make this work overnight. It doesn't work like that. And we people working with local communities, we can assure you from our experience, this is not how it works. So it is really important to use the kind of language that new NGOs that just start their work will be able to understand. And we live in a hybrid world today. We have offline and online formats used together. So we can use all kinds of experts, international experts, local, regional ones, the ones from Moscow, national experts. It should be a mix. But just please be aware that you don't have to focus on the super gurus, world famous. And one more thing. If you invite somebody from the outside, people who know very little about your local context, this is not always the best option. On the other hand, sometimes in some cases this might work. You learn from external advisors for a little bit, and then you apply what you learn to your local context. So, Oleg, Snezhana, what do you think? Okay. After listening to all of you, it seems pretty complicated. No, actually, I think we might save some money this way. And let's use this approach they suggested. Let's look for the best regional developing consultants and ask them to turn our territory into an NGO Las Vegas. What do you think about that? I like the idea. What about our shareholders? How are we going to evaluate whether we have really turned it into Las Vegas? Right, it's a good question. Is there a way to measure success? Because with business, there's the bottom line, and the situation is pretty obvious. But what about social investment? Let's measure everything in rubles. If you get 1 ruble from us, you need to give 2 rubles back. What do you mean? So we will use business methodology to evaluate success, right? We have our accountant who can count everything. They can create a chart, give us a chart. Should we use some auditors? Yes, of course. Okay, let's talk about this. Ludmila, what about you? We know, what about your experience? Will business methodology work to evaluate success in social investment? How to measure unmeasurable things? That's something we all encounter. All grant-making organizations. Remember, there was the fairy tale about Cinderella. In this movie about Cinderella, Cinderella's sisters were writing down things like the prince looked at them twice and talked to them 3 times. They tried to measure things that are unmeasurable. Anyway, our foundation support small businesses and social projects in our territory. With small businesses, it's much easier because there is a clear way to measure results. And of course, it's extremely difficult to develop small businesses in Russia, especially in our territory. We're a special case. But with social investment, for example, if there is a project promoting healthy lifestyle, you can count, if it's just a sports events, you can count the number of kilometers, the number of miles that your runners ran during the event. But there are things you can't count, right? How many people gave up drinking? How do you count that? So, how do you measure your efficiency? This is always the most tricky question. So, we need to, even when you begin thinking about the project, you need to know clearly how you are going to measure your success. How do you evaluate your project? So, when we receive bids, we always issue an evaluation form. What kind of measurements will be used?
На самом деле даже не количество, а качество того проекта для данной конкретной территории.
And what matters is not even quantity. What matters is quality of the project. You may need various things work differently in various contexts. A certain project may work very well in one territory, may not work at all in a different territory. So you have to consider the local context, whether this particular project will work in this particular place. So that's what you should focus on. With social projects, very often it is very difficult to measure them, evaluate them. For example, we prepare books and films in indigenous languages. How do you measure that? When you create a film in a minority language, this film may win some prizes in some documentary festivals. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is you have to consider things that are particularly important for this particular territory. Okay, thank you. So what you're saying is with certain projects, you may not see results straight away. Some results are not quantitative, they're qualitative. So the way to measure their effect is to consider how much this project improved the quality of life, what kind of effect they had, whether they affected the target audience. And there is methodology for that. There is a separate methodology for assessing social return on investment. And there are categories. There is a category of experts who specialize in evaluating projects. So before you even start a project, it's important to ask yourself, what is the change that you are trying to effect? How do you envisage this change happening? So going back to Oleg and Snezhana, it's important to consider evaluation from the early stages. It won't be enough to use your usual business methodology. You may need to measure quality of the project as well as quantity. Looks kind of sad to me. Maybe we should consider who else operates in our territory. Yes, I guess there were some people. There was a corporation, it's not local, it's a national network, and they do some projects, and also there is a local foundation doing something, but I don't know anything about them. They don't. With this corporation, I guess we could meet with them and talk to them. We invite them for drinks, for example, but we need to do it in a smart way, find the right approach. Okay, what we need to do is find the best guys, see what they do, and then we do the same thing, only we do it better, right? And then we become #1 in our territory. We have personal contact with the governor. Let's do that. No, let's do this. Let's send a spy, a mole, to work in that company for a while. He will find out everything, report back to us. Yes, and then we'll just copy what they do, only we do it better. Spend more money. Good. This was an unexpected turn of events. There is a conspiracy going on here. Okay, Natalia, let me ask you. Actually, this is a partnership day, so what do you think about partnerships? We take a different approach. We take a constructive approach. We are pretty open. We have very positive experience. We started doing this several years ago, and our intention was to create a community within the municipalities where we operate. Our company is pretty big, so we were interested in creating a positive environment, positive atmosphere around our company and our city in general. So we came up with an initiative. Let me tell you about it. Joint projects. We provide funds, and we rely on several small businesses, our partners. These are our contractors, our suppliers, all companies with a small number of employees. So we came up with an idea that we all join together and work on our charitable projects together. If these companies, these other smaller companies, share our values, and it worked very well. When you co-fund certain project and you get small businesses on board, this way we were able to implement a number of very interesting projects. So their employees and local people found out that we can do something great together, some interesting projects. And these are all things that neither one of those companies would ever be able to do on their own. And yet together we were able to do it, and everybody appreciated it. Everybody saw how great this was. So that's just an example. This really works. And it has a very positive effect on the whole city. So I just recommend this to you. To us, this is one of our best approaches. Another thing you could do, you could use some professionals. Of course, if you use professionals, you get better quality. Let me give you an example. We have a contemporary arts center, and we have some professional artists who work with us. So we did a number of projects together. Of course, we are not professionals in contemporary art. We don't know much about it, but once we start working together with professionals, we can create something very good for developing creative arts in our cities. So this is what we are currently focusing on. We're gaining experience doing this kind of projects, and we plan to develop this further by offering our financial or personnel resources. We can produce good quality projects, and we get better effect when we partner up with others. Okay, I will go to Ludmila soon, but first I want to ask Yelena Malitskaya to say a few words. Who else can you partner with? Who else can be your partner? Natalia, thank you for mentioning this important question about partnership. Last year, we had a conference where a number of large companies were present. And all of a sudden, I realized that many people living in Novosibirsk were not even aware of what major companies were doing in our city. I couldn't believe it. Because people basically know what they do at the national level, what they do in Moscow, what they do about sustainability development goals, what they do on a global level, but people don't know what those huge companies do at a local level in their territory. So this meeting was quite instrumental for taking it to a local level. But let me tell you this. On a local level, you always have some organizations who are developing the local community, some infrastructure NGOs, some resource centers, community foundations. And if these are good resource centers, they always work closely with community foundations. For example, we have several community foundations in our locality, and we work very closely with them. And one more important point. Today, day 5 is Partnership Day. Unlike businesses, unlike companies, we don't have conspiracies like those two guys just talked about. It's not our goal to beat our rivals. No. Of course, sometimes you see a rivalry in the NGO sector as well, yet this is not our primary objective. Our goal is not to be number one and to get ahead of others. No. We know what partnership means. We know that partnership results in synergy. So if you start working in the new territory, look around yourselves. You will definitely find someone. They may not even be interested in getting your money. They are just interested in working together. Thanks, Ludmila. Ludmila, you wanted to say something. Yeah, thank you. I just want to say all of Russia's provinces created their territorial development organizations. For example, in our territory, there is an authority for supporting small and medium-sized businesses. But these are not grant-making organizations. They don't support NGOs, but they do support SMEs. So we work together with our regional authority in as far as support for small businesses is concerned.
Сначала они приходили к нам, мы их отправляли в эти фонды, и когда они получали поддержку.
And there's a program currently available at the national level. So people would come to us first, would tell them about the national support project, and eventually these projects will end up receiving support from several sources, and usually these kind of projects turn out to be the most sustainable ones, the most resilient ones, where you have a budget composed from support from several sources. If your project is supported at the regional level, at the national level, you can feel certain that this is the right kind of investment and this project will work. Okay, thank you. So you can have partnership and cooperation between different stakeholders, different kinds of organizations. So it's always possible to find something in common, some points of contact. You can find experts who can issue some valuable recommendations. You can have financial partnership. You can have information partnership when you try to reach out to as many people as possible. So Oleg and Snezhana, I think you're getting the picture now, how you can spend your money without losing it, wasting it. So are you ready to start? You're saying people may not even be interested in our money. I don't really believe that. We need to think about it. And partnership, we're not about partnership. We're not accustomed to being partners with anyone. Anyway, I think we need to take a pause. We need to think about it. We need to have a discussion. And actually, we are in the middle of the pandemic. I don't even know what will happen next. What will happen in a year? Oleg? Yeah, you have the pandemic. And I recently talked to the governor. He asked me to purchase a ton of ethanol for him. Again, yeah, disinfectant. So let's wait for a year. Maybe all the other foundations will close in a year and we'll be the only ones left. Okay, so here's another trend we observe. Over the last 6 months, we saw that the pandemic had a tremendous effect on everything we do, and actually on the whole mankind. So does this mean you have to suspend everything and wait? Margarita, what about you? What is your experience? How do you operate during the pandemic? Well, the brief answer is the pandemic truly stopped everything dead in its tracks. But we should remember that at the times of a crisis, people need your help more than ever. And this should give you the understanding that it is absolutely necessary to continue with your programs. It is even more necessary now. This is our social responsibility. This is the time You know, we've been talking about social responsibility for a very long time. Now the time has come for us to do something. Now it is the time of a challenge where a lot depends on us. So when the pandemic broke out, our first thought was, how are we going to organize our workshops? How are we going to have all our meetings? Probably we need to suspend everything. But thankfully, we have digital technology, and we were accustomed to using these digital tools. And initially, we were desperate. We had no other way to meet with anyone. This was the only way we could communicate. But it turned out, and every day we see, actually, computer technology, digital technology, they make our work, they make our partnership even more effective, strange as it may sound. Okay, let me give you a very simple example. Right now, I'm at this conference. We have people from several time zones, people from different countries, and yet we can have a discussion. We can learn from each other. We can share our best practices. And it's the same with partnership. You know, we live on Sakhalin Island. We are a very remote place. We are really separated from all the other places. And it's really hard for us to get to get all the NGOs together for a grant making event. Today, we just tell them we're going to have an online workshop at this time on this day. Just the other day, we had an online workshop. It was actually a hybrid. It was half offline, half online. We had a webcast on YouTube. So if you want to come, you can come if you have a chance to do so, or you can watch it online, you can participate online. And we had over 250 people who signed up for this workshop. We could never imagine this before. We would go and travel to remote places, collect 10 or 15 people and talk to them. So that was the average attendance, 10 to 15 in some remote village. But this week, we were able to talk to many places on Sakhalin Island and some from Khabarovsk. So there's always this silver lining. Even though this is a difficult situation, still, we mastered digital technology, and now we can reach out to even more people than before. So our experience is extremely positive. We received a lot of very practical questions, and we're able to answer those. We're still collecting bits. So I can't share any particular results right now, but just based on the quality of the bits that came in already, I can tell you we went to a whole new level now. So great. So we're using this digital technology, and we want to be creative, we want to go further. So as our next step, we'll have video classes on social projects. We have prepared a series of classes that will be available online on our website. So all those interested will be able to attend those classes, watch those videos, learn about social projects. And these new formats are hugely popular. So I think the time has come for us to step up and start working in a new way. Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. You sound very energetic. I really can see this situation. So let me give an overview of what we discussed. And Oleg and Snezhana, I want you to give up your roles and come back to your normal personas, because after I give the overview, I would ask Oleg and Snezhana to say something as yourselves, as specialists. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and after that, we'll ask James to talk to us and give us his perspective. So, today, we discussed that if we really want to waste money on a local community, what we need to do is just pick a couple of strong NGOs that you're familiar with, give them as much money as you can, invite top coaches from Moscow, some gurus, don't consider local experts, use business metrics to evaluate your social impact, and try to be number one. Don't partner with anyone, and forget about the pandemic. Don't use digital technology. Of course, nobody wants to make such mistakes on purpose. Yet, we see all these problems very often. Sometimes we make those mistakes, sometimes we see others making these mistakes. Well, we are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's really not easy to work with local communities. And we also identified a couple of important trends today. Number one, we work with local communities in a hybrid age. For example, Ludmila mentioned it's important to support small businesses. If you develop small businesses, this really helps the territory to develop. Natalia mentioned creative industries. It's important to support cultural projects, arts. And I really agree. Our foundation helps 200 cities with the charitable festivals. We understand that it's important to have festivals and events. Also, it is important to know who may become a leader to raise active people, leaders. So if you're an investor, if you want to develop a local community, you should also be looking for activists, active people. And we should be working with activist groups. In the past, we had a heavy focus on NGOs. Today, for the last couple of years, we've had this realization that you should also be working with informal groups of active citizens. We said that money in itself is not a cure-all. You need the right instruments to be able to use this money effectively, to affect qualitative change for the people living in your territory. And we have a broad range of tools available. The pandemic forced us to rethink a lot of things. We need to be able to manage these projects in the situation of uncertainty. That's why we have emergency funds for NGOs so they can continue with their programs. So it's important to maintain this continuity. One more thing we mentioned is certain territories now have their own local educating NGOs, NGOs helping other NGOs operating in this territory. So as the number of active living NGOs grows, you have more and more initiatives. This is an indicator of the local community successfully developing. And those NGOs can have a voice, they can take up responsibility, offer a solution, even come up with an initiative. And you can't evaluate this progress in KPIs. And starting with the initial stage, you need to know what kind of change you are trying to achieve, what kind of results you're looking for. And since I'm a very practical person, my foundation is a very practical organization, I'm very happy that this area, like Elena said, there is no competition here. There is no ground for competition here. We're all speaking the same language. We're all in the same boat. So resource centers, leadership companies should create platforms where you can have big business and small businesses working together, sharing experience. I really agree with that. Regional CSR managers don't often participate in our conferences in Moscow. They may not even be aware of what is really happening. So it's also important to support individual CSR managers. This requires additional effort. That's a separate area of work. This partnership facilitation doesn't come out of the blue. Somebody should support this as well. So the NGO sector develops, and we have such organizations in every territory. We have these, what we call resource centers. So it's important to look around, to take initiative, to set up meetings. And finally, we mentioned the pandemic. Like I said, we don't need to suspend all of our programs. There are new formats available. You can use new educational formats. You can work with various experts from different locations at the same time, kind of like what we're doing today. With some of us, it's early morning. With others, it's late in the evening. And yet we can be together. Okay, now I will ask Oleg and Snezhana. And I have one question for all the speakers, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to answer. Just if you want to say something. How sustainable do you think these new partnerships are? Oleg, Snezhana, to you first. And then if you want to respond to my question, feel free. Okay, Snezhana, you go first. Okay, thanks. Actually, we're not as stupid as you might think based on what we were saying as we played our roles. Okay, I live in a remote city. So what I would like to say is a few words for large foundations. There are many companies that need your help as far as education is concerned. Let's say there is a large company and you have a division in a smaller town and you want to do something for a smaller community, but you don't know how to start this work, you don't know whom to talk to. So I think maybe some of us should reach out to such companies and help them understand what is currently happening and what instruments are available. Because regional companies are very often not even aware of that. Maybe we could ask the Russian Donors Forum to include this in their agenda. Remember what I said about partnership facilitation. That's a separate area of work. Maybe we need the Donors Forum to help us with that. Reach out to regional companies and make them aware. Oleg? I agree with Snezhana. Each territory is special in its own way. There are bigger territories There are places like Sakhalin Island. There are places like Mordovia. They don't have any industry there. They don't have any companies. And even the Volga River didn't go through this territory. Instead, it took a turn and went around Mordovia. So what you can do is talk to small businesses in the territory, explain to them what CSR means. Personally, I'm not aware of any company in our territory that would have a CSR director or CSR manager. I don't know a single company in our province that has this position. And when a large company or a large foundation go to a small territory, they go there like conquistadors conquering Latin America. Their approach is to wipe out everybody, baptize everybody by fire. That's their approach. This kind of expansionist approach never works. And usually this results in a failure. I think you should take a more careful and reasonable approach. That's all I have. Thanks, Oleg. This is Partnership Day. So I guess the answer to what you said is it's important to find the resources and work on developing partnerships. This requires some time. This doesn't come out of nowhere. Okay, before I give the floor to James, I saw Sasha has joined us, but okay, Sasha, you're just here for closing remarks. Before we go to James, I have a question. Maybe one person could answer it because we're running out of time. How sustainable are these new partnerships? Does anybody have an answer? Yelena? Unmute your mic. At this point, I believe during the pandemic, these partnerships are pretty stable. We have new partnerships emerging because even businesses had to change to adapt to the new situation with COVID-19. Yet I was happy to see that in many cases, people would turn to their regular partners to help them find the right path during this COVID situation. None of us are healthcare experts, but still we need each other to figure out what to do because of this pandemic. So I guess this virus really brought us together and forced us to be partners. We see that people rely on each other more these days, and even businesses forget about competition for the time being and come together to help their territories together, support the local communities. So personally, my answer to your question is yes, partnerships really work, and this is important. And one more surprising thing that I observed during the pandemic, we saw more intersectoral partnership during the pandemic. You didn't mention the government a lot, but of course we all know when a company starts its operation in a particular territory, they first go to see the governor, they first go to see local authorities. You know, I can share our experience during the first wave of the coronavirus in our city, in Novosibirsk. We all spoke the same language. there was complete understanding between local authorities and the NGO sector. We were able to talk to each other very frankly. Okay, very good. We now go to James McGowan, head of the European Community Foundation Initiative. James, I know that your organization worked a lot and you provided a lot of help to community foundations during the pandemic. So could you please tell us more about what you learned, your takeaways from this situation? Please.
Dasha, thank you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join this theatre today. And I assure you, I am only going to be playing a role of myself and nobody else. And thanks to the interpreter who's doing a wonderful job to keep me in touch. And I will be brief, but I will try and be slow enough to give the interpreter a chance to work the other way as well, unless you're able to follow me in English. Very quickly, ECFI, the European Community Foundation Initiative, has a mission to support the development of community foundations right across Europe. And in particular, we have an initiative this year that focuses on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, because we see this as being something of real significance at local level, and in particular for community foundations. And I'll come to this in a moment in relation to the quest that you had about wasting your money or not wasting your money on local action. So with that, in ECFI, we have run a number of workshops. We've really explored how community foundations can embrace the SDGs, and in particular how this can add value to their work. And I think this is important from a partnership perspective of all the three elements that you have of this conference: the SDGs, the local action, and the partnership perspective, that the SDGs is in fact the connecting factor here. I just want to also say a word about, and Lena mentioned it just in her last comment there, about the impact of coronavirus as well, and how this has actually enhanced the level of interest, I think, and the importance, the significance of the Sustainable Development Goals. On the one hand, one might have thought everything else is off the agenda. It's only about coronavirus. But what it has served to do is to highlight many of the issues and the goals that the SDGs are trying to achieve: inequality, the importance of health and well-being, the need for sustainable cities, the importance of education, and so on. These underlying issues remain, and in fact have been accentuated by the pandemic. And the very fact that the pandemic has served to demonstrate the connection between something that is very global pandemic, and how it impacts on people's lives at local level. So it's complete connection between global and local. And the significance that Lena referred to of the response is that the response is also global and local. Global in terms of trying to find a vaccine, but local in terms of the actions that impact on people: providing food, providing PPE, providing connections, mutual support between people. And how that has been achieved has been through connections that might not have been so obvious or important in the past: intersectoral connections, connections between people, connections between communities, connections between donors and NGO actions. So I think all the more the pandemic has served to highlight the importance of local and local action and local knowledge. Mm-hmm. Now, let me come to the issue of whether you waste your money or not waste your money. And Dasha had summarized that very well in terms of how to waste your money clearly by just being patronizing, throwing money at a project that sounds good, and so on. Well, on the reverse side of it, the corollary of how to ensure you do not waste your money, I think the approach is absolutely, first of all, to think, where do we have a shared objective? Where do we have a common agenda? How can we work together with our resources, be they financial, technical, our connections, and so on, as a donor, and you as an NGO working in the field with your knowledge, expertise, and ideas to affect change? How can we combine those resources in the most effective way, which is not about patronizing and throwing just money at an issue? A partnership approach ensures that both sides benefit, that there's mutual respect from that, and that you can get leverage, so that it's not just a financial transaction, but there's leverage of knowledge, of skills, of other resources and expertise. So that's a primary thing, is about developing that mutual respect between both the donor and the NGO. And what I would try and encourage, and this is quite fundamental, I think, in a lot of the work of local organizations in particular, is to think of funding the organization rather than the project. And I know you need to be accountable, of course, and you need to find ways of doing that. But if you can build a trusted relationship, that you're investing in that organization because they are best placed to know what to do and how to do that effectively, not through your training or bringing in expertise to train them in how to manage a project, but invest in that organization, invest in the people in that organization, so that they will decide best how to use the resources and to add value to your resources. I mean, it is not just a single one-way transaction that as a grant, that money is gone and you want to return for that money. Potentially, you can add value to that through the organization. And I particularly give a shout out to community foundations, because I think as local institutions, they are really well placed to ensure that there is value added, because they can take a holistic approach to the area. They can identify other partners, see the synergies that was referred to before. So what does this do? How does this relate to the SDGs? Well, here we have a fantastic opportunity, because the SDGs provide you both, NGO and donor, with a ready-made, brilliant framework of goals that are wonderfully articulated through nice icons, and you can easily identify where you have your common objectives. And what I would suggest is that you use you apply an SDG lens to developing your partnership. So, for example, the donor might think, right, what is our objective? Are we focused on education, or is it a sustainable community and a city? Or is it health and well-being, which is our primary area of interest, rather than saying, we've got money, let's find a nice sounding project. Mm-hmm. Think of that, and then identify which NGOs share those goals, who wants to achieve those same goals. And then you can align both your objectives and use the common language of the SDGs in order to develop your partnership together. Through that, then, what you'll get is more than just a result of social return on investment in your money, but you will get leverage from the knowledge that there is locally, the connections that the NGO might have with others, and there you will actually add value to the resources. So, to summarize with all of that, what I'm suggesting is, think SDGs, look through an SDG lens in what you're doing, and take a selfish approach. And I don't shy away from suggesting this. Take a totally selfish approach. The SDGs are good for you. And if the SDGs are good for you, you're good for the SDGs. Thank you.
Спасибо, Джеймс, огромное. И получилось, что у нас еще такая связка между...
Thank you, James. So you even brought in previous days of our conferences when we talked about the SDGs a lot, and you kind of rounded it all up. Thank you very much. I think This was a very interesting theater, interesting quest session. We were able to see a lot of interesting things. Sasha from the Donors Forum, thank you very much for organizing this. Sasha, yes, thank you. Big thank you to all of you. And Dasha, thank you for moderating. Oleg, Snezhana, thank you for playing your roles. You were brilliant. And thank you, James, for bringing us back to the central subject of our conference. And we had all kinds of places represented in this session from all over the globe. James is in Ireland, from Ireland to Sakhalin Island. So please stay with us. We continue with our conference. We'll come back in a few minutes. Thank you. Colleagues, I just wanted to say thank you. Very big thank you to all of you. It worked really well, I think. And